Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Nucleus Investment Insights. Today's episode is called Sorting the Weird Renewable Energy Tech from the Wonderful. Today we have a special guest, Rosie Barnes, from the YouTube channel Engineering with Rosie. She has a PhD in mechanical engineering and has 15 years of experience working as an engineer developing new energy technologies. On her YouTube channel, she explains and reviews renewable energy technologies from an engineer's perspective. Rosie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. Today, as always, I want to welcome the co-founder and chief investment officer at Nucleus Wealth, Damien Klassen. Welcome.
Hey, Sam.
Hello. My name's Sam Kerr. I'm the senior financial advisor at Nucleus Wealth. On the agenda today, we'll have a wide-ranging discussion about technologies involved in the transition to renewables. In particular, we have Rosie on to discuss what are the most interesting technologies right now and which ones are most likely to continue to get incremental cost reductions. We'll also discuss which are the potential home run technologies that we should be watching in case there are any significant breakthroughs. And we'll also get Rosie's thoughts on the evolution of the energy market into renewables. For those listeners that don't know, Nucleus Wealth is an Australian active and passive investment manager. We're a global macro investment house and use the insights shared in this podcast to construct and manage our active portfolios. We're also the first to offer passive direct indexing in Australia, which has been labelled ETFs 2.0, as you can customise your chosen index with around 50 different ethical, sector and asset class screens that we have on offer across all the active and passive portfolios. Just a quick housekeeping message. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell below to be notified when we go live or have a new episode recorded. We are normally live every Thursday at 12:30 Sydney, Melbourne time, but today is a pre-record. Usually you can jump onto the YouTube channel and ask any questions that come to mind. You can also follow us on your preferred podcast platform, and our show is available on all the majors. And if you'd like to look at the slides in more detail, we'll post them in the show notes this afternoon, and you can view these at nucleuswealth.com/webinars. So now we've got those formalities out of the way. Damo, I'll hand over to you to lead us away.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So, look, for anyone who hasn't listened to Rosie's podcast, if you're interested in someone who can sort of take the more complicated ideas and boil them down to I guess something simple for I'd like to think people who are intelligent but don't have might not have an engineering degree or might not be intimately involved with it. I think she does a great job of that, and that was why I wanted to get Rosie on to sort of talk about some of the technologies, and particularly because I think she's been focusing a lot on costs recently, and we have a big focus as well on some of these costs, and really just looking at the particularly the fuel costs because they've been so volatile recently, and so I thought that's probably where we'd start. I've got a couple of charts which Sam will pop up. One which we've sort of shown a lot, which is sort of this idea of that coal and gas and coal and gas sort of been relatively stagnant in terms of the prices. They haven't really changed a lot over the sort of longer term, but actually we've seen a pretty big spike up recently because the prices of both those have shot up. Whereas solar and wind and batteries are all sort of on this curve, sort of where it keeps falling year over year. And the part I was sort of focus in on for us is the fact that, well, you can break those costs into two parts, and that's, we've got a table up which has got the levelized cost of energy, which is sort of trying to map it, and just keeping in mind that this changes by region, it changes by technology, it changes by a whole bunch of other factors, but it's sort of so all the numbers are sort of approximately right. And then but I've broken it into the cost ex fuel and the cost of fuel, because if you look at, say, coal at sort of $50 to $100 a ton, which is where it's traditionally been, it's sort of 6 or 7 US cents a kilowatt hour. If you look at where it is now, sort of $300 a ton, then you can basically double that. There's a huge difference in the price of in that prices, and it goes even more for gas. So gas has got sort of lower sort of fixed costs and higher fuel costs. And so so you can really see some big differences in terms of those. And so I guess that's where I sort of start with, in terms of saying, it seems to me that there's been a certain explosion of interest in projects and new things coming on, but there's obviously permitting issues. Is there a big sort of I guess elephant stuck in the python as moving through projects? Is that what I guess you're hearing, or what do you see the sort of the scale of how fast? I mean, it looks like Europe's really trying to move quickly to this. So
yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to move quickly. I think, I mean, yeah, Europe is more affected than Australia, and I think Australia's been more affected than the US in terms of fuel prices. I don't think that there's an elephant in the pipeline, but something that you know might get moving with a bit of a with a bit of a shove. Definitely, there's some challenges at the moment, and yeah, I mean, if you look at that cost reduction curve for solar, well, now is one of the rare moments when prices for solar I think it's increased 20%, the capital cost at least. It's gone up 20% in the last year. So, and I think that my understanding is that's primarily because there's more demand for solar panels than there has been. And yeah, it takes some time for new factories to spring up to make all of those, you know, upstream components that need to go into solar panels and then get them out into solar farms or on rooftops. So
yeah, so it's not really while there's been some material changes, but most of it's really in the yeah, my sort of read is there's been a little bit of cost movement, but they're still wildly profitable, and they've just been, because everyone wants solar panels, they're just charging more to bring it back. So
yeah,
that's what it says. Yeah, you'd expect that to come back down once new capacity comes on.
Yeah, and there's a big incentive for new capacity to come on at the moment. And then I think you can contrast that a little bit with wind, which also, you know, there's lots of demand, and prices should be going up, I expect, although I haven't seen so much of that yet. But somehow it's not resulting in really high profits for the the wind turbine manufacturers, and a lot of them are really struggling at the moment. And
yeah, and I mean, Vestas is coming out losses again. That was one stock a few years ago. We used to own Vestas and then sold it a couple of years ago, and it's always one I've sort of kept an eye on. And they sort of
right.
It seems mysterious as well. Like their whole conference calls are sort of like, well, yeah, lots of demand, and we've got a few problems here and a few problems there, but you know, everything looks pretty good in the future. And mind you, we lost a lot of money this year. And you're like, sorry, something doesn't add up.
Yeah, and I mean they I'm often puzzled by their you know, management announcements that they make. The most recent one was that I scratched my head at was they decided that 15 megawatts is a good place to end wind turbine growth for offshore. You know, and I'm sure everybody's aware that wind turbines are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Seems like relentless and no end in sight. Yeah, Vestas have come out and announced, 15 megawatts is where it should stop. And it's just a bit odd because other manufacturers are already announcing bigger than 15 megawatt turbines, and, you know, making prototype blades for these huge turbines. So it seems like they're out of date already by the time the announcement hits. And it also is a bit strange that a manufacturer thinks that the decision is up to them. You know, if other people are making bigger turbines and people want to buy bigger turbines, then yeah, Vestas' strategy seems questionable. But you know, I'm not a business person in that sense, so maybe maybe they've got some smart strategy that I can't get my head around.
Well, okay, well, that's probably a good place to start in terms of wind. So, I mean, do you want to give us a quick sort of, I mean, I know that there's a long history, but maybe just a sort of the 2 or 3 minute overview of, like, you know, wind power, sort of where it's come from. It's obviously been around for a long time, and sort of where we sort of are now in terms of the last sort of 10, 15 years in terms of technologies and I guess changes.
Yeah. Well, I guess can pick where to go back because it has been around for, I think, thousands of years. But if we go back to around the 1900s, that's when rural Denmark wanted to electrify, and they figured that wind was the best way to do that. So that was when a lot of the research on wind turbines was done, and a lot of the features that you see in modern wind turbines came from research that was done back then in rural Denmark, where I lived in the neighborhood for 5 years up to the pandemic, so that's kind of close to my heart. And then I guess it was in the 1970s that when there was the oil crisis, that made people around the world, feel like they would prefer not to rely on oil anymore. And so there was interest in wind. Then that went away, and most places stopped, being interested in wind energy at that time. A few countries like Denmark continued. And then it was, I guess, in the mid 80s or 90s when it started. It's like, the classic rollout curve of new technologies where, growth was exponential and prices started coming down on a nice curve. I joined the industry about 10 years ago. And at that time, wind and solar were not quite competitive with fossil fuel electricity generation. So we weren't quite at grid parity. And I'd been working on a bunch of research stage renewable energy technologies, and getting pretty frustrated that whilst I was working in renewable electricity, I was never actually, contributing to a green electron being generated. So that's why I chose to go into wind, because I could see that with a bit more effort, then we we're going to get to grid parity. And then, I had been so frustrated by the politics around climate change. And so my whole thing was, okay, we can ignore the politics if we just get the economics right. So yeah, since that time, the price of wind is usually coming out cheaper than the price of new build fossil fuels and gas turbines. And then now you even see often that the marginal cost of running an existing gas or coal power plant is more than putting in new wind turbines or solar panels. So
yeah, well, that's exactly that one from that chart.
Economic trajectory.
Yeah, that's exactly that one from that chart where, at $20 a BTU, it's costing you 13 cents for natural gas, and wind's going to be 3 cents. So even once you start sticking, batteries here, there, and everywhere, you're still miles in front.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question, I guess my question over the last sort of say 10 to 15 years, then, would you say that, or what do you think in terms of the cost reductions, how much of it do you think is technological change versus I guess dramatic technological change versus incremental? Yeah, okay, we built 1,000 of these, and now we've built, we got 10 of them, and then we built 100, and we got way better. Once we got 100, and then we built 1,000, we got way better, and 10,000. So that sort of, I guess, you just the sort of natural learning curve from increasing and doing things and sort of making incremental changes versus, has there been any sort of major big design or any sort of breakthroughs that you think have really driven that price lower versus, the bigger, I guess the taller and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I think it's what you said with the increasing manufacturing volumes, and there's a name for it, Wright's law, which is a bit like Moore's law, which a lot of people know for semiconductors. But Wright's law basically says, with every doubling of volume of a technology sold, then there will be a constant price reduction. So that's why you see, like, early on, it's easy to go from 10 units to 20 units to 40 units, and you get a lot of price reductions really fast. But then once the technology is quite mature and there's, 1 million out there, then to get the same, say, 5 or 10% decrease, you need to go from 1 million to 2 million to 4 million to 8 million. It gets harder and harder. And that explains the vast bulk of the price reductions for wind and solar. But I think hidden in that is all of the major technology improvements that have actually caused that, because it is all caused by technology improvements. People say, manufacturing of scale, but the cost reductions that come from manufacturing at scale are from little tiny technology improvements. Either in the technology itself. So if you look at the curve for solar, for example, it's not the exact same solar panel that's been made since the 90s, and they just figured out how to make that exact same thing cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. It's a bunch of different kinds of solar cell that have had incremental improvements in efficiency and incremental decreases in cost for the manufacturing method, the process itself, which is definitely a technology thing, and more so than people realize. So I guess it's a really long way of saying that it's definitely both.
With both,
to a non-engineer or someone who's not working in that, in that factory or in that manufacturing company, they probably see like really tiny, boring things that happen to cause those cost reductions. But for the people working on the projects, it's like, oh my God, this is so huge. We've gone from 20.1% efficiency to 20.6% efficiency. Like, this is the biggest thing ever. But that doesn't sound exciting.
Well,
it's just, like a tiny little distance along.
Yeah, that's right. But every bit's that extra bit along, that helps drive it down. And that's where, and so I guess from that perspective, the bit I always wonder about, and I probably wonder about it more with solar than what I do with wind technology, is that I sort of look at, there's different technologies around the world. And one of them, I'm going to contrast, say, the making of like a router or something like that Cisco does, where, it really doesn't change that much. There's some incremental change over time. Yeah, you need to keep investing in your R&D, but you know what? There's going to be this gradual change in the router over time. Whereas like a chip from your latest chip that runs your phone, there's a new one out next year and the year after, and it's 20% faster and 30% faster. And if you're not out there coming up with a new latest and greatest chip, then you're seeing what is happening with Intel now, where you're copying it because you just don't have the latest and greatest, because they move a lot faster. And it would seem to me that the wind stuff seems to be more on the router type thing. Yes, I've got my wind factories, I'm producing these turbines and I'm gradually making incremental changes, but really they're not changing that much. Whereas on the solar side, I think that's true, but I look at some of those charts with all these different types of solar, multi-junction, thin film, name your 6 other different types that come out. And I'm just like, well, I don't know if there's something's going to appear in the solar area that I've just never even heard of. That's, let's say it's thin film, and they go, oh, we just worked out how to reduce the cost by 90%. And now we're painting it all over the place, and we don't need the other things. I don't know whether that sounds right to you, or you think it's more stable than what I suspect.
Well, I'm a lot less of a solar expert than I am a wind one, but so maybe I might not have any more sophisticated understanding than you. But my understanding is that with solar, new chemistry comes out and it blows most of the rest of it away. And of course, the existing technology will hang around for a while. But I don't think that it is so much so that whole companies and whole factories are so specifically associated with one that they disappear when the next thing comes out, because that's what happens in some industries. It really shakes up who the major players are. So I think a lot of it stays the same, even if the one new technology comes in and blows away the old one. I don't think it's causing industrial chaos or anything. And then in wind, it was certainly the case that for at least up until, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe even a bit more than 5 years ago, it was very incremental and very staid and careful. It went from a 12-meter long wind turbine blade made out of fiberglass, and then the next year someone would do a 13-meter one, and it would be exactly the same, but just slightly scaled, and you rerun your same design calculations, and then everything's fine. And then the next year you go up to 14 meters, and then maybe someone goes crazy and goes up to 16 meters, 2-meter jump in 1 year. And that's kind of how it went. That's how it went up to like 60 meters ish. Really, really very similar. And around that point, it got pretty hard to do that anymore. You needed to change some things. And so a lot of new technologies were introduced at once that you can't see from the outside. So it still looks like everything is exactly the same. But in fact, in the last 5 or so years in the wind industry, technology has all of a sudden been moving fast, and there's been a lot of really big new things. Some examples are using carbon fiber in wind turbine blades, and in addition to fiberglass. That was a very big thing. Changes the lightning protection of wind turbines, which is a huge thing, and by far the most common type of defect. Because one of the things that I do with my consulting work is I work with asset owners, wind farm owners who have problems with their wind turbines and are, trying to talk to the manufacturer about who's responsible. And lightning is a classic one where you end up in a three-way fight between the asset owner, the manufacturer, and the insurance company, because everybody's sure that they're not responsible for what's happened. And part of the problem is that, these wind turbine manufacturers have decades of experience with their lightning protection system. So they're very sure that it works, but something happened in the last few years that means that the new systems don't work as reliably as the old ones, and we're in some sort of teething phase. And yeah, there's quite a lot of small different changes that have caused that to happen, and I would say that we don't fully understand what's going on yet. So we'll probably see some more expensive serial defects as a result of that one.
Right.
And yeah.
Sorry, and is some of that because they're just so much taller now as well, or is it?
Yeah. Being taller is a big aspect of that. And I mean, the fact that the blades are longer, that's the reason why the carbon fiber was added. And then, carbon fiber is conductive, so lightning would like to travel along that. And the designers of a lightning protection system would prefer that it didn't, strongly prefer that it didn't. And so it's a lot of complicated things like that.
Right. And technologically wise then, so in terms of okay, so actually we'll get to costs in a second though. So in terms of scaling the sort of the physics, so I guess I hear this trotted out, but I feel like I've heard it trotted out for probably the last 15 years is like, oh, we've almost reached the limit of the physics and whatever, and then they go, oh no, actually guess what, we just stuck something else on there, or as you said, we stuck carbon fiber and now we can make it taller. And so I guess your thoughts in terms of that, on the whole physics, like is there genuinely on wind, I guess, less upside than say solar in terms of being able to keep continuing to drive down that cost and improve efficiency?
There probably is, but not for that reason. And this is a super common question, and one that I usually don't like the answer when I see it in an article written. So I made a video on that recently about all the scaling laws for wind turbines. And so my take on it, and bearing in mind I have my PhD is on structural design of wind turbine blades, so it's definitely right in my wheelhouse. It's not. We haven't reached any physical limit, and we're not making wind turbines as big as we can make them. We're making them so that they deliver the cheapest electricity that is possible. And so at any moment in time, the optimal size of a wind turbine is the current size of the wind turbine, because the wind turbine manufacturers have very strong incentives to sell to design the size of wind turbine that delivers the cheapest electricity. And so in the video that I made, I kind of separated into onshore and offshore, and you do see a real divergence in terms of the size of wind turbines for onshore versus offshore. So offshore are continuing to grow and grow and grow, and onshore have sort of stabilized, or they're at least increasing much more slowly, and because they've got different kinds of design constraints. For onshore, I mean, aside from permitting, which might restrict the height of the structure that you can put in, let's ignore that, pretend that doesn't exist. There's also a lot of problems with transport. You can imagine that it's very hard to transport like a 100-meter long blade on normal roads. And when you scale up the blade itself, then you're going to also scale up the root diameter, and then it gets so big that it can't fit under a bridge, and you can't go around any corners. And there's some solutions to any one of those problems, but for the blades and the towers onshore, there are strong constraints trying to keep it small, because otherwise it gets too expensive. And then, a new technology will come away that removes one of those constraints, and they'll continue to grow. So, instead of making towers out of tubular steel sections that you transport on trucks, maybe you'll weld the towers in place or 3D print them, or, something like that. And then for offshore, you just build your factory right next to the port, and then you never have to go on a road. And so you can make things as big as you want. And so they're getting bigger. But the actual scaling laws would prefer things to be small than to be big. If you double the length of a wind turbine blade or a tower, then you're going to need to roughly double all the dimensions, which is going to give you a cubing of the volume and the mass. So it's because, you double, it's called the square cube law. And it's the same, reason it often gets, it gets raised as a reason why dinosaurs couldn't just get, infinitely large. It's because the strength, varies, or in the case of a wind turbine, the amount of power that comes out of a wind turbine varies with the square of the blade length, because it's, the swept area, but the mass and therefore the materials requirement varies with the cube. So that means that there's the engineering constraint is to have smaller wind turbines. But then there's all these other factors that want them to be big, and especially in the case of offshore, it's really expensive. Every electrical connection that you have to make, every subsea cable that you have to connect, that adds a lot of money, and it's better to have fewer, bigger wind turbines for that reason than a whole lot of small ones. So it's all these competing things. Some want things to be big, some want them to be small. In my video, I made it a tug of war, team big versus team small. And at the moment, we still see, for offshore especially, see team big winning and turbines are getting bigger and bigger. But it's not because we can't, we're not going to, the reason that they're not bigger now isn't because we couldn't make them bigger now. It's because it would make more expensive electricity to make them bigger now.
Yeah, and I wonder though, because I do want to talk a little bit about nuclear in a little bit, just because I know that's something you touched on. But the thing I often wonder with that as a technology is that especially even these small modular nuclear ones, is that you're actually just not making that many of them. Like even if they're going to roll them out, you're talking about tens or hundreds of them. You're not talking about thousands. And I wonder if there's something with the wind turbines where if you keep making bigger and bigger ones, and you're like, okay, well, we've just made a field of 10 versus somebody who's gone, just printed 1 million new solar panels, is whether there's, you're almost losing some of that incremental bit, if you know what I mean. Each one turns into a tailored masterpiece of, look how I've just built myself this massive, massive wind tower. That's, I don't know whether you got any thoughts on that scaling.
I think so. There is a scaling, and having more smaller should make costs come down faster than fewer big ones. But it's not like, so people sometimes misunderstand that that kind of trend. It's not that there is a constant, the same cost reduction for every technology. You double it and you get a 5% reduction in technology. It's got a different amount for every technology, and so you call the learning rate. And so the learning rate for solar panels is much higher than the learning rate for wind turbines, and much higher than it is for, nuclear's costs have been going up, so it's got a negative learning rate. You get worse at it the more that we make of them. So it's not, you can't really compare.
Is that for your mind?
Just technologies.
Yeah, sure. But in your mind, is that some of that nuclear stuff is actually, it's just working out, actually, here's something else that can go wrong we didn't think of. We need an extra safety system there. Is that seems to be the nuclear stuff to me? But
I have a slightly controversial opinion. I don't know. That people are usually at one of two extremes with nuclear. There aren't so many people in the middle, and I feel like I am somewhere in the middle. Nuclear is really safe, actually, and if you look at the numbers, then there's way fewer deaths per megawatt hour generated from nuclear than there is with nearly anything else. Some renewable technologies beat it, and others don't. And where millions of people die every year from particulate pollution from coal and burning other things for electricity. No one cares about that. They only care about nuclear because it happens infrequently. With a lot of deaths at once, and it's kind of a gross way to die. So I kind of understand that, but I personally think we probably overdo it on safety for nuclear, which is I can't believe I said that out loud on a recorded podcast. But if you just stay really cold-hearted and just look at the stats, I think that's part of it, is overdoing it on safety. Because you look at it's only the Western world that has nuclear power prices that are going up.
Exactly.
The developing world is still getting them made quickly, and
costs you 3 times as much to make it in France than it does in China or something like that.
Yeah.
But well, won't. I mean, I do think there's probably a middle ground. I think you're probably right, but I guess the question is, will we ever reach that? I guess that I won't even put this to you, but it's sort of like the question for everyone, I guess, is will we ever get to that middle ground? Because that's the one from me for always the small modular reactor sort of. I don't even call them believers. I think some of them seem to be. I don't know. They're trying to convert everyone. The next level up from believer, but
yeah, it's definitely really weird. People that talk about nuclear online are a weird group of people. Sorry if you do that, but maybe you should take a look at what you're writing and see if maybe you're one of the weirdos.
Because I think
with small modular reactors, there's something there for sure, but people get a bit carried away. So they're going to be smaller, so there's going to be more. So they're going to have some sort of better learning rate. But to get that, it needs to be exactly the same thing every time. Make it in a factory exactly the same. So it can't be just that. Just because we've built, I don't know, thousands of airports in the world doesn't mean that airports are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to build every time, because you have to start from scratch with a new design every time, and have it's going to be totally tailored. Some aspects of small modular reactors are taking advantage of that, but I am not sure that we're going to see enough of it that is really going to be, able to be made in a factory and then transported. Because if you're using local labor each time, then your workforce can't really, get those efficiencies that you want to see. And also the numbers. They're called small, but they're not small. It's not like, it's not like a desktop reactor or going to go on your roof or something. So they're smaller. It should be called smaller modular reactors, maybe. So I think that they're not going to shoot down that cost curve the way that solar panels have. That's for sure. And people who think that they are probably people that have only spent 1 or 2 minutes thinking about SMRs, and no more would be my suggestion.
Well, and look, as I said, I'm with you that look, if the costs add up for it, if they come out and go, hey, actually we just built it and it cost us 5 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that, it's like, I was wrong, off you guys go. But getting that social license as well is going to be difficult. Anyway, let's jump from that one, I guess. So technologically wise, so wind technology and solar, I guess, what's the I'm interested in the most exciting sort of technology that we should, the sort of the home run technology we should be watching, I suppose. That is there something out there that's like, well, somebody's trying a new version of, XYZ, and if it comes off, then it's gonna make all these other ones redundant, or am I being, or is there nothing sort of really massive out there on the horizon that you're seeing?
Well, I guess for solar, it's perovskite. I don't know enough yet to say for sure whether, I think that it's going to totally take over, but certainly there's the potential for that to displace a fair chunk, like tens of percents of, existing solar. And it's moving pretty quick. They are pretty quickly, hitting the goals that they need to become a player. What they're struggling with currently is lifetime. They're not very robust. They degrade pretty quickly, way quicker.
Do you want to give a quick background to the perovskite? What it is? Just the 2-minute version.
Let me just get some help from my notes, because it's not. I'm not so much an expert on the solar stuff, and I haven't been super involved with the perovskite. The reason that I know about it at all is actually the first renewable energy job that I had way back. I was 1 year out of university, I think, and I was working for this company called Dysol, and they made dye-sensitized solar cells, which is kind of like artificial photosynthesis. And so that was supposed to be a way that you could make solar panels with way, way, way cheaper components. So, at the time, silicon was very, very expensive. And so these ones just used glass and titanium dioxide. And they had lower efficiency and, terrible lifetime. and that kind of died out. And then out of the ashes, that company that I worked for has it's not the same company, but a lot of the same people have gone on to this perovskite company. So it's a new chemistry. It's supposed to eventually be a way that you can, combine multiple layers and end up with a higher efficiency. And there's quite a few teams around the world working on that. But like I said, the main problem is how long that these panels last for. And at the moment, it's, it's not long enough, because a regular solar panel lasts for like 20, 30 years. And think about it, if you're going to put them on your roof, you don't want to be up there replacing panels every couple of years. And I don't think that they even reliably last that long yet. So that's a big hurdle to overcome, but that
could make a huge difference to it. Yeah, because it's sort of like I don't know, that the fracking whole idea. I don't know whether this seems slightly. It's probably not quite the same analogy, but the whole fracking idea initially, when people were like, "Oh, these wells deplete at 90% per annum in the first few years, and you get all your oil in the first couple of years, and then there's nothing left," and you're like, that's great, because I spend lots of money up front, and I get back my payback over 3 years or 4 or 5 years, and then I can go build another one if I want to. And so those types of ones, sort of in a way, if it's so much cheaper, I guess is what that I can see there's actually a pretty good investment argument for bigger investors who are like, yeah, okay, great, I've just bought this solar panel, it's going to last me 30 years. I have no idea what the electricity market's going to look like in 30 years. But at least if it's only going to last me 5 years, I can actually go, oh, great, I've got a good view of what it's looking like over 5 years. And then so that's interesting. And wind wise, what's anything big on the horizon that we should be watching? Or
I think it's offshore and floating offshore probably are the main things. I don't think offshore is ever going to get cheaper than onshore, or even that the cost of the electricity from them is going to ever get cheaper than onshore. But there's some big pluses associated with offshore. First, it just simplifies a lot of the roadblocks. Like there's kind of annoying roadblocks that you get if you want to develop a wind farm in a country like Australia or the US. You get a lot of people complaining if they're not financially benefiting them, they don't want to look at them. And transmission is becoming a huge big problem as well. There's been protests about some of the new transmission that they need to build here in Australia, and I think it's even worse in the US. I think they have to negotiate with every single landowner, and if you're crossing state lines, and that changes things. So if you build offshore, then you have the chance to actually reduce the amount of transmission you need, because all our cities are on the coast. So you can build the wind farm out there, you put it in a very expensive subsea cable to get it to the shore, but then a lot of the projects people have planned so far, or trying to plan so far, they're located close to like a big coal power plant or something where there's already transmission in place that's going to be unused once that coal plant closes down. And so it is a way to avoid the transmission problem. Plus it solves a bit of a problem with some of the variability of renewables. Again, like it's location dependent, but Star of the South, which is the first one that we have officially given what's it called, major project status, or whatever that term is for the government's, said, yep, go ahead and do that, or plan that. They have a really great wind resource that picks up in the afternoon, is when there's the most wind, and that's also when you use the most electricity, and when solar is just dying down. So electricity prices are usually really high. So they're going to get really great value from that asset. So you might pay double, at least probably double, to build that wind farm than you would to build something similar onshore. But the electricity will probably be worth double as well, or thereabouts.
Yeah, so it's worth a lot because the storage is still expensive. I guess that's I think this is a trade-off, isn't it? So you're sort of sitting there with these three things about going, I could build a wind farm twice as big onshore, or build half as big offshore, but I get twice my resources offshore is a lot better. But then I've just got to pay the transmission cost and the extra cost of building it. Or if I could store it really cheaply, then I could just store it, build twice as big onshore and store it and then just drip it out whenever so is that the way you think about it, or is it, I don't know, I sort of look at all these and sort of go, it's a trade-off between how much transition cost, how much storage cost, and if storage keeps coming down, then it seems to me that the argument for offshore might get weaker over time if storage is coming down.
Yeah, it depends what kind of storage you're talking about, because the duration matters, and you can't just compare like an average day, to design your system. So on the average day, there's plenty of solar power in the system in the middle of the day, and the evening peak is, just after the sun sets and people are at home making dinner and turning on the kettle and that sort of thing. So it sounds like, we just need, 4-hour batteries and we've solved our whole problem, but not every single day is sunny. Yeah. And so the expensive parts, when you engineer any kind of system, whether it's your power network or whether it's, a dam for your drinking water, if you just want to deal with the average, it's very, very cheap. But if you want reliability, that's what you pay for. And there's a big difference in cost for 90% reliability, 99%, 99.9. You probably add the same amount of cost to
doubling every time or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's been my argument on EVs as well, is that, the average person drives 100 kilometers a day or something like that. And you go, sure. You could have a battery. If everyone just had a battery that was 100 kilometers, could take you 100 kilometers, they're profitable now, but nobody wants 100 kilometer battery. Everyone wants like a 500 kilometer or 600 kilometer. And so you're like, well, I'm going to buy a 600 kilometer battery and have, 500, I'm going to have 3/4 of it or whatever it is. It's going to be 6 times more expensive than the size I probably need. But people aren't going to buy the smaller ones. And so therefore,
but I don't understand with that. I don't understand, like most people have 2 cars in a family now, right? And one of those cars is probably exclusively driving to and from work, and probably would be doing maybe 50 k's a day. Why aren't those cars going electric? Because my partner and I, we share a car, and both of us ride our bikes to work, or I work a lot from home. All we do is long road trips. And so like we desperately want to buy an EV, but we only use our car for the hard use case. And I got a loan of a Polestar a little while ago. They lent me a car for a month.
I saw the video on that one.
A video about it. That was the best YouTuber perk by far that I've had so far. And the car is amazing. There's nothing wrong with EVs. It's the charging infrastructure that's the problem. And people talk about range anxiety. No such thing as range anxiety. You very quickly learn to trust your car's computer. What you have is charger anxiety. I was actually, when I went to Wagga Wagga to take a look at this perovskite research facility, it's going to be a manufacturing facility. Got there super late because of some problems with chargers along the way. I'd come from Melbourne, and then I was leaving there about 6. I got to the single charger public charger in Wagga Wagga. Somebody was there charging. Had to wait, ages for them to come back and then charge up. All because I probably could have made it to Gundagai to charge up there, but I just couldn't risk running out. I was going to get there with like 15 k's range left or something. It's further than I'd pushed it. The temperature was dropping. So I guess that is a combination of range anxiety, but primarily charger anxiety. What happens if I get to Gundagai and that charger is bust? Then I'm going to be stuck in Gundagai at like 9 o'clock at night. Wasn't interested.
You can't go fill up a jerrycan and bring it back.
No, but you can call NRMA and they'll come help you. So so it's not too bad. But so I went through all that, and I'm like, it's just, I hate to admit it, but where EVs aren't, the whole EV system is not ready for us yet. When I get a second car, it'll be electric. But what about all those people with second cars that drive short trips every day and they never go to the coast or do a road trip in it? Why aren't they all electric?
Yeah, well, and it makes and I think for me as well, like there's obviously this bit about what are your petrol prices, what are your electricity prices, and we did some stuff on it a little while ago, just looking at different countries, because the US actually adds up quite looks quite good from a conversion, because they've got such cheap electricity, and yeah, petrol's cheap there as well, but electricity is so much cheaper than what you find in a lot of other countries, that actually the maths add up much better in the US. They add up really well in China, where petrol's quite expensive and energy's quite cheap. But Europe and Australia, because both are quite expensive, actually the economics just don't add up the same way as what they do in other countries, depending upon what you're.
Even with home charging.
Oh, home charging completely changes it. Yeah, because it's a difference between it's really about how cheap it is to, because if you're saying, okay, I'm filling up for whatever 30 cents from plugging it in somewhere, versus doing it at home where it's effectively free, or whatever you want, 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, actually, and more, that's the price. That's the stuff you would have pumped into the grid anyway, and they would have paid you almost nothing for it. So yeah. So then the economics are like way in your favor for doing if you charge off your
Because I did that calculation for my I think I drove. I can't even remember how many. It was thousands of kilometers anyway that I drove, and I did that calculation. Mine was nearly all public charges, because it was on the highway, and it was a little bit cheaper, but it did include some free charges, some of the NRMA charges in small towns like in Jindabyne and in Mittagong and a few other places. Some of those have free charges. But I learned to hate the free charges, because the free charges attract a lot of people to them, so they have queues.
Right.
So,
It's a question of your time. Is your time? Do you want to wait an hour and have free one, or do you just want to pay for it and get on your way?
And you don't know how long you're going to wait. There was one that I was at. I learned very quickly, you don't try and charge at a free charger at 12 o'clock on a Saturday, because there was a queue of like 6 or 8 people by the time that I was finished there.
So 12 lunchtime, 12 o'clock, not midnight.
Yeah. Lunchtime. That's the incorrect time. Yeah.
Yes.
So some people were waiting hours to charge, and there's no queuing system. So you've kind of got to stay in the area to make sure that you actually get ahead.
Which doesn't sound like a technology you want to be using just yet. Yes. Okay. So solar transfer. So in terms of storage, then, so you've got this, as you said, talking about that whole averages. There's this part where you go, yes, if you just if, let's say you're running your own one off your roof, and you're like, okay, I use a third of it during the day, and I store 2/3 of it, and then that gets me through the night, and then I'm off and running. So that's and sort of on our numbers, that's still a little bit expensive. Like, and it's not like it's coming down, obviously, the jump in the last year, but give it a couple of years of growth, and it's probably there. But then that next phase is obviously what you're saying about, okay, what happens when you've just had a week of rain, or whatever it is, or no, and you need some other backup technology or some other backup storage. I guess we've both spoken with Paul Martin. We had him on a podcast, because I know you've had him on there, and he's quite vehement in his thoughts on hydrogen as a fuel, which I sort of get from okay, I know I'm going to lose 80% of it, because it's going to go, I'm going to start with electricity, turn it into hydrogen, burn it, turn it back into electricity, and the round trips, very, very expensive. Have you got any other thoughts on other technologies that you think are sort of capable of filling that gap of the I guess the emergency storage, I suppose, as opposed to the day-to-day storage?
Yeah. So some of what I do for work is I'll sometimes design like an energy system for like a remote industrial project or something like that. So mini grids, I guess you'd call them, although sometimes they're quite large with big industrial processes. And depending on what's available in the area, you see different kinds of energy storage being the right choice. So if you're not able to connect to the grid and so have a large geographic area, then you're going to need more storage. Like when you have, like, say, the east coast of Australia is all connected to the grid, and so when it's windy in South Australia, it's might not be windy in Queensland, but it's rarely not windy across the whole of the Australian grid. And especially if you add offshore in. And then solar as well to a certain extent. I mean, obviously, in the East Coast of Australia all sees night at the same time. There's nothing that you can do about that. But, you know, if it's cloudy in one place, not necessarily in another. And so in Australia, when you look at how much storage you need, like people think you need 2-3 weeks of storage, but it's just absolutely not true. In Australia, you know, you don't see whole weeks where there's no wind power and no solar. So it's probably less than you'd think. And one guy who I like his analysis on this area is Dave Osman. I don't know if you know him or if you're on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter. He has this highly renewable energy simulation where he just scales the current amount of wind and solar that we have and adds to it a 5-hour battery or 5 hours of storage of some sort.
Yeah, I have seen
and then you look at the weather over the past week and see, you know, how much of that could have been served by this system. And, you know, he's done it over a year and it's at 99%, I'm pretty sure, currently, on average. So, you know, it's 5 hours of storage, which is 24 gigawatts and 120 gigawatt hours. So it's way less than you would think to get close to 100. Now, if you wanted to go to 100, then you would need a lot more. But I think a 99% renewable grid done very easily is better than 100% one that, you know, is consumes the whole of the country's resources.
Yeah, and the idea is the other 1%, you charge up your gas-fired plant or whatever, and you pump the electricity in on that one other 1%. That's the idea?
Yes, or eventually, this is where I see hydrogen's place. It's for that 1%.
Yes.
You know, you use gas until you've got spare green hydrogen, and then you use green hydrogen then. So, but it depends. I mean, most of the storage is actually going to be from, there'll be a lot of batteries, like lithium-ion batteries, and then pumped hydro for the longer duration stuff. And if I'm designing a mini grid or a microgrid, and they have any sort of, what am I trying to say, elevation relief in the vicinity, you need about 100 meters at least to make it worthwhile, then that's going to be the cheapest way to get a long duration of storage. But if you don't have that, then
that's
hydrogen is a pretty good bet. Yeah, pumped hydro. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, okay, so I've just said to you, yep, I've got a mine somewhere in the outback of nowhere, and it's, you know, nowhere near anywhere, and yeah, we're going to run a bunch of wind and solar and some batteries to do our stuff, but we need the longer duration storage as well. In terms of your stack, I guess, as you're looking through, like, where do you start? So the first one is the first one is water, by the sound of it, pumped hydro. What's the next? What's your sort of, I guess, stack as you go down, as to say, okay, which technology am I doing next? Because I've seen those ones where they're lifting the cement blocks and stuff like that, and I don't know.
You should do an investigation into that technology. That there's one company in particular that is very interesting if you follow their announcements. But anyway, I won't go into that now. I wouldn't want to say something that got me in trouble.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, back to your question on storage. You're definitely going to want some lithium-ion batteries. That's by far the cheapest for anything that it can kind of handle. Then that's going to be the cheapest. And if you follow around the world,
as a short-term measure, isn't it? As you said,
yeah,
like, it's
but
sort
it's
of
pushing out longer.
Yeah, because if I need a day's worth, then a lithium-ion battery's great. But if I need 7 days worth, it's like, well, now I've got to spend 7 times as much, as opposed to.
So I mean, so far most, and it varies from region to region where lithium-ion batteries are at, but you know, like an hour is a pretty common duration, so it will fully discharge in 1 hour. 2 hours is getting more common, 4 hours, but you're also seeing in some of the energy storage auctions, I've got some in California and some other places around the world where people just bid in for how cheap they can supply, you know, say an 8-hour or 10-hour storage, and you are starting to see lithium ion win those as well, mostly, but not maybe exclusively. There are some, it's a space. Energy storage is really interesting because other than lithium ion batteries, all of the big contenders, it's really old technologies that we could have been doing at any time, but we just haven't had the need for. You know, like pumped hydro has been around for a very, very long time. And then even, like you said, gravity storage, you haul up, something heavy and then use the power when it drops. That's how a grandfather clock works. It's, it's not exactly cutting edge. Then there's compressed air storage. I just saw an announcement for a big compressed air plant. Hydrogen, of course. I don't know. There's lots of different ones like that. But so far, the only ones that I'm seeing make a lot of sense is lithium-ion batteries, pumped hydro if the landscape is right, which is a lot more common than you'd think. People think that you need very specific circumstances, but if you're going off river, then you just need two places separated by 100 meters in elevation and the ability to make a reservoir there. And Andrew Blakers from the ANU has published that his team assessed the whole world and found, many times more, potential for off-river pumped hydro than the amount of energy storage that we need.
Oh, really? So let's say, just put this in I don't know if you know this type of thing offhand, but let's say I wanted to, I had my house and I wanted to have some sort of backup storage. Is it a swimming pool sized effectively, or is it spa sized, or is it 10 swimming pools that I need in terms of just if I had, let's just say, an ordinary house and I wanted to run it for a week?
You're going to make me do arithmetic on the fly. I'm
I guess
terrible at arithmetic, but the equation is MGH, mass times gravity times height. That will give you the.
I guess what I'm trying to work out is it's more like I go, okay, well, let's say I don't know, pick the city of Sydney, and go, okay, well, if I need to power the city, if I need to, power that for a day because of whatever reason, do I just need so much water that it's actually there's just too much water to do cities that, we're talking about much smaller amounts, or is it feasible to consider that type of thing, I guess? Because okay, so if everyone needed a swimming pool, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's doable. A lot of people have swimming pools, and but if everyone needs like 20 swimming pools, it's like, okay, that's starting to seem like it's too much water. Anyway, I won't put you on the spot. Maybe that's one.
I'm trying to just find. So a good example would be Snowy Hydro. It's 2 gigawatts and 350 gigawatt hours of storage. And then, so to get to 99% electricity, according to Dave Osman's scenario, is 24 gigawatts and 120 gigawatt hours. So the duration of storage is good from pumped hydro usually, but the power is probably not enough. So you're going to want 12 of them to get enough, 12 Snowy Hydro 2.0s to get enough storage. That would be 5 hours of storage, or the power would be right. And we probably don't have that in us. Five Snowy 2.0s, that's a pretty big one. So it's not. It's one needs to be part of a system. I don't think any energy storage is going to be, the silver bullet, the single technology that's going to make everything easy. And I mean, that's true for anything that you can ask about the energy transition. People are always desperately trying to find, especially politicians, they want one thing that, can get your head around that. And even better if that one thing allows us to continue exactly as we have and not change our behavior at all and acts exactly like fossil fuels used to. And that's what hydrogen is. That's why everybody loves hydrogen, because it's so easy to describe. It sounds exactly like what we're familiar with, and who cares if it, is just incredibly expensive and wasteful of our resources if you need to build 3 times the number of wind turbines and
I feel as well, if I'm somewhere involved in the combustion engine chain, then I'm like, we still need combustion engines. I'm still relevant, as opposed to actually, if we go electric, then I'm not relevant anymore. So, actually, that just one quick one as well. It just occurred to me a second ago. I was trying to move forward. I forgot to ask it. Was on the when we're talking about the politics side, I don't know. I want to put this in a way you can actually answer it. Let's say I'm looking at a new Aldi wants to open up in a region somewhere, and all of a sudden all these groups magically spring up, with a little bit of help from Coles and Woolies to say, oh, there's not enough parking, there's not enough whatever, this is terrible, and it'll cause all these problems. You get these grassroots things that help that are sponsored.
I think that's
Yeah.
cool.
And I guess what I'm wondering is, like, you see a lot of this whole, that wind farm kills all these birds, and that sound sends me crazy and all that. And I'm just not sure how much of that's. I guess what I'm wondering is, does it seem as if the fossil fuel guys are active in the astroturfing area?
Yes, but it's not only that. So I think early on, with the wind industry, there were a lot of mistakes made. I don't know, it's not really a thing anymore, but people used to be very worried about wind turbine syndrome. Do you remember that, or
Yep.
did you hear of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not
Giving
a real
headaches and all this
it's not
type of
a
stuff like
real in anything. There was a doctor who compiled. He had a website that had a list of everything that had been attributed to it. It was quite a hilarious read. It had stuff on it like, my chickens started laying yolkless eggs. My son doesn't want to go to school anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Like stuff like anything. You can blame anything: weight loss, weight gain, headaches, lack of sleep. Things that every adult just experiences in their life. That was all caused by wind turbine syndrome. So it's not a real medical thing, but it was real to the people that thought that they had it. And so all of us engineers working in the wind industry are like, oh, that's not real, ignore that. But that wasn't really the best outcome for the wind industry, because
that doesn't make people feel good. Yeah.
No, and it caused a lot of project delays, dealing with all these angry people who were legitimately upset. And part of it is because, there was this like specific campaign. I don't know if it was fossil fuel sponsored or if they were actual true believers, but there were some people who traveled around to towns where there were wind farms proposed and whipped up this, fear of the wind turbines. And so towns that had a visit from this group had very high incidences of wind turbine syndrome, and towns where they didn't go didn't. So so it wasn't real in one sense, but on the other hand, these people were legitimately afraid and anxious, and that is a real problem in a way that isn't something that engineers are used to worrying about. So now when you go to a wind energy conference, every single session, the speaker will mention social license, and there's always whole streams on social license, and we're starting to see the same now with transmission. People are opposing new transmission projects, and so everyone's like, okay, we know by now that we have to get communities on board. That's very important. So it's taken really seriously now, I would say. I don't think that, mistakes aren't still being made, but in general, no one will just be like, like you're worried about a power line, but it's not going to do anything to you. So just like, we're going to ignore you, and we don't even need to pay attention to you anyway, because the government can just acquire that land and force you to have it. That's not actually the best way to deal with a project. So and in the case of wind farms, the issues now are more like, I don't want to look at it, or it's killing heaps of birds, and it's super noisy, and all of those things are true to a certain extent. Like, you can see them, that's true. They do kill some birds, and they do make some noise, but way less than other things that we put up with. So, the noise from a wind turbine is much quieter than the noise from a road. There's roads everywhere.
Yep.
They kill birds, but like thousands of times less than cats and cars and buildings, and no one ever, opposes those things. So they exist. They're not huge problems, except that people care about them.
Well, and that's the same argument there for the nuclear, isn't it? Is that, yes, maybe in a completely dispassionate version, this might be better, but if people really care about it and aren't going to, more worry about the extreme versions. Okay, so and so that sort of leads down a similar path, and actually the transmission stuff does sort of lead down this path. Is saying I guess one vision of the future is that we end up with this, wind all over the place, solar all over the place, some batteries, and community batteries and shared, or some behind the meter, some in front of the meter, all that type of stuff, and we're sort of balancing everything out, and some longer term storage, as I said, whether it's pumped hydro or hydrogen or something like that. That's our emergency, and everything's all hooked up. And another version goes, well, are we better off with just a whole bunch of microgrids then? Do we just get rid of all of this transmission, and if the battery technology is good enough, then I'll just have a solar farm that's 4 times bigger than what I need, and batteries 4 times bigger than what I need, and off I go. And so and if we ever run out, I don't know, maybe people ship some charged batteries in from somewhere else if need be.
Yeah, maybe.
Is there a, I don't know, I guess in terms of that, I can sort of see, I feel like as if we're headed sort of down this, everything needs to be connected path, but I'm still not quite sure why the microgrids is I know the technology is not there yet for it, but I'm not quite sure why the microgrids is not a viable outcome as well.
I wouldn't say that microgrid technology isn't there. There's plenty of microgrids operating and have been for a long time, and Australia probably has a lot more than most, and
with diesel backups usually nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Diesel backup. So, and that's it. It's reliability. So, if you are served by a microgrid, then you're probably experiencing a lot more blackouts than somebody that's connected up to grid and anywhere connected to the grid in East Coast Australia, or or Western Australia's, or anywhere else in the world. And they are okay with that. We're not okay with it in Australia. Like if you look at the reliability, I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but it's not like 99% reliability is good enough, or 99.9% reliability is good enough. Like it's very, very, very reliable, that the people demand of the grid. And so that's the reason why you're connecting everything up, because it will be cheaper. And I mean, you're starting to see now homes that have solar panels, making more solar power than they can probably use, and they have a battery, and they might on average be a net exporter to the grid, and hopefully they're making some money off that. But it would be incredibly expensive for them to disconnect from the grid entirely. We were threatened, I don't know if people talk about it so much anymore, but people were talking about this death spiral that people would, the rich people that could afford solar panels and batteries would disconnect from the grid, and then the people left over would have to pay the whole cost of the grid. But no one's disconnecting from the grid because it is such a cheap form of reliability compared to what you would have to pay for in terms of, like if you want to get as reliable a system for your house, not connected to the grid as it is connected to the grid, then you're probably going to build a second house and just fill it full of batteries.
10 times the storage space that you do if you connect.
It would be way more than 10 times. And also at the moment, the cost structure is really it's unfair, because you pay all of the network has to exist for reliability for that 1 or 0.1% of the time when you need to transport electricity from a long way away, but you don't, and everyone wants to be connected for that, but you pay based on how many kilowatt hours you take from the grid. So it means that if you are taking very few because you've got solar power on your roof and some batteries, you pay nothing effectively for this incredibly valuable reliability that you get from it. And that's super unfair. They should change that. You should be paying a fixed charge to be connected to the network, not have it be averaged out over kilowatt hours, so that because then you are going to see, if more and more people start getting batteries and exporting and having very little usage, then you're going to see fewer and fewer people paying for all the network costs. It's definitely going to be the less wealthy people, renters, and that's not fair.
That does make that obviously makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So in terms of transmission, there's the DC transmission stuff. So yeah. So I know. Sorry, we're of the time as well. Sorry, we've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate it. Got two more questions. One. So in terms of transmission, are we seeing? I think that it was a lot in China. I'm trying to remember the right name. The ones doing the extra high loads, long distances. I can't remember what they call them. Ultra, something like that. I guess where I'm leading to the question actually is it, are we seeing costs in transmission come down significantly, or is this to sort of, have we got like there's a bit of stuff with DC and there's a bit of stuff with using a few different technologies, but there's probably, we've been doing transmission for a long time. There's probably not a lot of sort of consistent drops we're going to see in transmission, or do you think there is sort of incremental transmission gains we can get over time? Because that's that sort of trade-off between batteries and transmission, I guess, I'm getting to. If batteries keep falling and transmission doesn't, then, that changes the economics.
Yeah. No, I think transmission is also improving as well, the voltages that you can get, because basically that's what's limiting how far you can connect with high voltage or ultra high voltage cables is you want the voltage to be as high as possible so your current's low, and so you get less losses, because obviously if you have a certain percentage loss per kilometer, and then you double the length, then you double the losses, and with the really long cables you eventually get to the point where it's not worth even bothering. And actually I wish I had the stats here. I did read just the other day, I was reading an article about some cable, because they've got some turmoil in the moment in that
was my next question.
Project. And there was a significant loss from end to end in that one. Maybe I can quickly Google it next time you say something to find out what that was. But basically, I think the longest subsea cable at the moment is 720 kilometers between Norway and the UK. To get longer than that, you need to get higher voltages and thicker cables, and so that is incrementally getting there. I know the Sun cable, when they started at least, and it's probably still true now, there didn't exist a cable that could do what they wanted to do, but the technological progress was steady enough that they could project out and be pretty confident that they were going to get there in time. However, maybe that's not the case, because we have just seen that they're in administration, aren't they?
Yep, fighting over who's got the best vision for it. So, I guess that's where, my immediate thought when I saw that one was, okay, so sitting up in, and it's not even that close to the I think it's like 700 or 800 kilometers just to get it to the water to get it to Darwin. So it's not even not that close to the the ocean. Was that, it would seem to me sort of that, okay, if I'm going to connect up and send it back to Sydney, for example, or back to Brisbane, probably a lot closer, and then it's probably not that far to hook it up to the national electricity market, maybe 1,000 kilometers rather than, I don't know, I think it might be 4,000 or 5,000, I think, maybe, to get to Singapore. So it's quite a long way, and so that's sort of, and then as well, you're generating it, an hour or two offset in terms of sunlight from the east coast, and so you've probably got a pickup of, there's an hour or two of battery you actually don't need, that you can quite valuable. That sort of seems to make more sense to me than saying, let's take this thing, get it 700 kilometers, get it to the coast, now build the world's longest one, head west. So now we're actually offset as well. So we'll be generating it we'll be generating all the power. It'll shut off, before the end of the day, and then everyone will get home. And so we're going to need batteries at the other end to store it, so that then as people get home. So yeah, that's where I could never really work out the economics of it. I could see the politics of it, but I couldn't work out the economics.
Well, so it would be way, way, way easier to connect that same solar farm to the East Coast grid than it would be to connect it to Singapore. You're definitely right there. But we would never, I'm sitting on the East Coast, and I think you are too, just connected
Melbourne and Sam's in Brisbane. So.
Yeah, to the NEM, the National Electricity Market, to that main grid. We don't need that solar farm. We're never going to pay for that. We've got plenty of opportunities to generate our own renewable electricity, much closer and much cheaper than that. But Singapore, on the other hand, does not have a lot of other easier options to generate renewable electricity. And so that's the reason why it's going north-south rather than east-west, just simply because, like, why? It's like, people say, oh, we've got so much renewables in Australia, we'll put a subsea cable to New Zealand. New Zealand doesn't need renewable electricity to the extent that they're going to pay for it, via an expensive subsea cable. And New Zealand actually isn't that close anyway. It feels closer than it is. So I think that the goal made sense because it's a difficult place to. Singapore is densely populated, and so they could put solar panels on every roof. They probably don't have a lot of other spaces to put solar panels, and it would not come remotely close to making a dent on their energy needs. And so they're looking at a bunch of projects like this. They weren't going to get all their electricity from sun cable, but like a good chunk could come from it if the project ever gets finished. And then they've got a few others, and they're going to pay a lot more than that for that than what me sitting here in Canberra, what I pay for my renewable electricity.
And I guess floating solar, is that?
I can't quite get my head around floating solar. Floating wind, I don't think I got there, but when I was talking about offshore wind being, the most exciting technology, floating offshore wind is my this is a cool technology and it might actually do something. There's a lot of cool technologies that I like to cover on my channel, and I usually like to just say how they're never going anywhere and don't don't bother. It's been tried, it doesn't work. They work, but they're never going to be economic. So floating offshore wind, I like and think it will be something. But floating solar,
offshore. I don't know about offshore solar. I think the stuff I've seen is more on dams and stuff like that.
On dams that makes sense, or canals or something can reduce some evaporation, cool your solar panels so you get a little bit more efficiency. Yes, it makes some sort of sense as long as as long as you're putting it in something where you don't really care what it looks like, because for example, they're always talking about put them in dams in Switzerland, but those dams in Switzerland are very beautiful, and they might be man-made, but they're beautiful. They get a lot of tourism. I don't think that they're going to just be plastering solar panels all over those, and everyone's going to be just cool with that. But there are heaps of floating offshore solar farms as well. Definitely. That's where I see more project announcements like that. And that I can't quite understand because, when the difference between onshore and offshore wind is a doubling in cost, basically, because it's such a harsh environment. Maintenance is a nightmare. But you get that extra value from, stronger, more consistent winds, and they're probably at a better time of day. But an offshore solar farm, I can't see, it's not like you get the sun is twice as strong offshore, or it shines at a different time of day. So I don't see the benefit.
And I thought it was twice as I think on dams that's twice or three times as expensive as fixed ones on dams, and so I just think sticking it offshore again has got to double it or triple it again from there, and then you'd think that. In a storm, I figure, well, in a storm, I can see where the wind, this massive wind tower, that's probably going to be all right. But I don't know. It just seems a solar panel floating on what is, I don't.
So I don't understand it. But I will be honest that initially I thought that offshore wind was just, a ploy by offshore oil and gas to, siphon off renewable energy money to develop something that they had skills in, and I've done a total 180 on that. Now I'm hugely in favor of offshore wind, and very excited that we're gonna we're starting down that path in Australia. So could easily be wrong about floating offshore solar. I just don't see it yet.
Excellent. Okay, is there anything major that you think I've missed? What's burning.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure there's heaps of stuff we didn't get to, but
I think I went off on a few tangents and I didn't stay totally focused. So I hope we got to everything that you wanted to cover, all the most important ones anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very appreciate you coming on and really appreciate the insights you have. And I think as is with everything, it's all about the cost and there's some great technologies that are just too expensive, and there's some pretty crappy technologies that are just really cheap, and so I think there's investment ideas in all of them.
Yeah, it is a bit of a shame about the energy transition that, it's good for climate change, bad for just, cool stuff happening. But, we can easily get more than 90% of the way there with very boring technologies. And so, we really do have what we need. So it's really fun to talk about lab scale stuff, but I would say that nothing that's in the lab now is going to have any contribution to the energy transition, because it takes 20 years for something to get from the lab and out in the commercial world in enough volume to make a dent on anything. So we didn't talk about nuclear fusion, but that's super exciting technology, may well be the future of the energy system, but it's irrelevant for this energy transition. At least it might be the next one.
I did a project I feel like in 1985 or something like that on that, about how it was just around the corner. National Geographic, I think, had it on the front page, and it was just about here.
Yeah.
Energy
nerds like me like to joke that it's one of the, the speed of light is one of the, fundamental universal constants, and how far away fusion is from commercialization. That's another one of the universe's constants.
Yeah, that's right.
Always,
and one day we'll be wrong and very happy about it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Appreciate it. So, Sam, do you want to?
Yeah, we've got the question of the week. So this is for viewers to have some discussion in the comment section over the coming days. The question for the week is: what do you think the most interesting energy technology will be over the next 10 years? So feel free to post your thoughts and engage with us and some of the other viewers over the coming days. And Rosie, would like to just give you an opportunity. You've obviously got your podcast engineering with Rosie. You mentioned some consulting. So if you just want to tell the viewers a little bit about what you do and how they can connect with you, go for it.
Yeah, so my small consulting company is called Part Alert Consulting, and do energy technology development work with companies developing new energy technologies. And then the other side of that is also for investors or developers, helping them do due diligence and other issues that might arise with technologies that they have invested in or own.
Okay, fantastic. And do you want to tell the viewers about your two podcasts as well?
Oh, yeah. So there's the engineering channel, Engineering with Rosie, which you can just search that on YouTube and you'll find that. And then I also co-host the UPTIME Wind Energy podcast with a couple of American co-hosts. And we don't only talk about wind energy news, all kinds of clean tech news. And that's a weekly podcast.
Excellent. We'll put links to those in the show notes for anyone to click through.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Thanks. Super informative. I'm sure the viewers got plenty of interesting nuggets out of that. And so we look forward to having you back again soon.
Yeah, and that's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. And thanks, Damo. Thanks for putting on the show. We're about to wrap it up. Excellent. So we do welcome your feedback on the podcast, especially in regards to suggestions for future topics. If you do have any ideas, please drop it in the comments section below or send us an email at contact@nucleuswealth.com. Just a reminder, this is general advice and does not take into account your personal situation. If you do want to discuss your personal financial situation, please go to our website at nucleuswealth.com/contact and book a call with myself. Don't forget to like the video now, and if you know of anyone that might get some value out of today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you can please share it with them. And also, if you'd like to see more of our previous episodes and content, head over to nucleuswealth.com/content, or subscribe to our homepage for our weekly Nucleus news and investment insights. We do put out a lot of articles and videos in addition to our podcasts. And of course, you can follow us on all major social media. So for myself, Damien, Rosie, and the rest of the team at Nucleus Wealth, thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.